All right, so I've been asked, why am I doing this? And then I was asked, well, why did I do the fulfillment source code? Which are different, because this is happening 5 years or so since I started the fulfillment source code. So it's two different stories. Now, this part, the sharing, the videotaping of all the things that I've gone through, it's essentially, well, first and foremost, I figure if I can share this with everybody who's over 10, all of the things that, man, I wish I knew these things when I was 10, and I feel that they have helped me. If I can share these, I feel like I should share these. So there's that. I can't, the first thing is I can share this, and I think it will help other people. On a bigger picture, I would say that by sharing some of these, like the evidence-based whys, hows, and whats that essentially help all humans get closer to that point of thriving, I figure that will help shift from what we have now, which is very consumer-oriented, it's like this obsession with more, this constant more, which is based off of what, the only way I can explain it is it's an incomplete equation, and I'll get into the details in a second, that we've all been fed since we were born about what we need in order to be happy. Which again, it's this incomplete equation. And if we can get the full picture, then we can move from this unhealthy incomplete formula to something that's better, that's more balanced, more towards being fulfilled, and whatever that might mean specifically to you, but you'll have the fundamentals to understand at least that. And then, of course, perhaps by sharing all of this, we will attract some of the parents of these pre-tweens who have the resources to be like, ooh, I want my kids to learn this. And then by doing that, it will help fuel this fulfillment revolution. So those are the reasons, those are the 3 reasons why I'm doing this. Now, if you ask me, well, why did I do all of this? That's a bit more of that's a longer story. And essentially it didn't happen all at once, of course. I think it was, my daughter was around, 9 or 10 years old, and I was in between projects, and I was looking for something that I thought would be cool to do. And so I was watching some TED Talks, and I saw this TED Talk on neuroplasticity. And I remember going, wow, that's so cool. You can teach an old dog new tricks. But here's neuroplasticity saying that, it's not easy, but it can absolutely be done. And this is how it works. And it applies to everybody. And I was like, man, my life would probably be pretty different if I knew that when I was 10. I was like, oh, I want my daughter to know this. And then I saw this other video, another TED Talk on cognitive biases. And I was like, whoa, that's so cool. The fact that we are all hardwired, and I know the hardwired is not exactly the right word, but essentially it's like we've got these shortcuts, these brain shortcuts that all humans share. Primarily, it might look a little different depending on where you come from, but essentially it's like, our cognitive biases, the confirmation bias, the negativity bias, et cetera, there are like 200 of them. We all have them because they made sense 50,000 years ago, but we still have them. And so I was like, oh, cognitive biases, that's so cool. I wish I knew that when I was 10. And then I saw another TED Talk on the gut biome. And I was like, no way. Like learning about all of these things about what we eat and how it impacts us. And, like how not only is it like important on the what we're eating and feeding these microorganisms and how that affects our health. I was like, man, I wish I knew that when I was 10. So a combination of these TED Talks, and I was like, why don't we teach this to kids at 10? Like my life would be so different if I just knew those 3 things. And that was like just the tip of the iceberg, right? So it all started with that. And essentially it snowballed from there. I approached my daughter's teacher, who I was like, look, I think we should or could teach our kids all of these things that are essentially in the personal development industry. The whole thing is about becoming better. And I was like, why don't we give this to the kids? And she was like, yes, these kids totally need this. Like, I know we do all of these other things academically, but the kids totally need this stuff. And the stuff that we're currently giving them, it's like drips and drabs. It's just not quite there. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna do this. I had no idea what I was getting into, and it's kind of ballooned from there. But that's why I did this, because I wish I knew this stuff when I was 10. And 2, I really wanted my daughter to have at least the beginnings of these skills, like the understanding. Like, she didn't have to master all of these things, but if she was just aware of them and just like started on that from awareness to competency, that, you know, hopefully by the time she's 20, it would lead to mastery on these different points. And I was like, man, my life would be so much different. I hope hers would be different. And because she was part of this international school, the course itself, the way that we did this, it had to apply to kids from all over the place. And so there was a ton of information, but I had to make sure that it would appeal to kids, like not North American kids or Asian kids or kids from a specific area, but kids. And by kids, I mean like pre-teens. I'll get into that later, but that's essentially why I'm doing, well, this, and why I started doing the Fulfillment Source Code. Joining the Fulfillment Revolution and becoming part of our little community is super easy. Just hit subscribe.